So the topic is, of course, what if reason just won't get us there? What if it won't save the planet? Few, many years ago, I was a student at Belfair United Church and a single parent of two small children. And as any parent will know, it's sometimes a stretch to get everybody together and up in the morning and out to church on time. And it was no different for us. We live very close to Queen Street, so we just walked to church. And my daughter got into the shower too late, got out of the shower too late. She looked like a drowned cat. Her hair was all straggly and wet. My son just wouldn't eat his breakfast. It was kind of like force feeding just to get him out the door. And then, of course, the walk down Queen Street, he had to stop constantly. He was very little, look in every store window, drag his heels. I was yelling at him. By the time we got to the steps of the church, we were not in an exactly exalted spiritual frame of mind for Easter morning. And that is when my young teenage daughter turned to me and said, "This is a picture, Mom. The dysfunctional family goes to church." And it was so true. That is who we were. The good news is that as we stepped through the doors of the church, all we met were other dysfunctional families who were gathered there. That was the fun part. You know, our ancient relatives in the Christian world thought of church, this place, as being heaven on earth. That's why churches are built to be so beautiful. That's why the cathedrals were supposed to be works of great beauty, because they were paradise on earth. And when you step through the doors, dysfunctional though we may be, you stepped into this communion of saints, into this holy community where we forgave each other for our inadequacies and where we loved each other even if we didn't like each other. And that is what church was. And you heard in Acts, it was even more than that. It was a place where every material good was shared among everyone. And in a sense, it still is. And then we take all this love that we experience here in community, and then we go out into the world to heal and to love and to do justice, what Martin Luther King called love. Justice is love in public. So that's when we go out to do justice. That's what church is meant to be, and that's really what it is, a most unreasonable place. And when you think of the early disciples and what they went through, whatever may have happened, whatever they saw when they encountered Christ, what they went through was to risk their lives for what they experienced. That holy community, that love they shared, that camaraderie, and that experience of the risen one. And how did they experience the risen one in this particular rendition? Through his woundedness. That's how we recognize each other, isn't it? Through our woundedness. Not in our strength, but in our woundedness. A beautiful passage. But what about reason? So at the turn of the last century, there was a theoretical physicist named John Archibald Wheeler. And this was over 100 years ago that he wrote this. He said, "There is no law except the law that there is no law." It's pretty out there for a physicist. Einstein said, "Two things are infinite, the universe and human stupidity, and I'm not sure about the universe." Martin Luther, way back when, hundreds of years ago, called our reason horror reason, because he recognized that our reason was really in subservience to our ego and could easily be in subservience to the empire of the day. That our reason would never get us there. Our reason alone, nothing wrong with reason, it's a gift from God, but our reason alone would never get us to the paradise, to the promised land, to heaven on earth. It just wouldn't get us there. And boy, do we have ample evidence of that over the last 500 years or so. Can't resist this joke, but this child comes home with a bad report card, and says, "What is it this time, Mum? Poor genes or a bad environment?" Reason, right? It's reason. Last Sunday was Easter, and it was also April Fool's Day. And Paul, although it's not in the readings today, talks about all of us as being fools for Christ. And we are really a little bit, aren't we? Certainly in the eyes of the world, coming to church on Sunday morning instead of Starbucks is a really bizarre thing to do. It's a strange thing to do, and it's not a popular thing to do anymore either. It's not like we're going to get a better job because we're meeting other people here. It's not because we're going to accrue anything to ourselves because we meet here. It really is for only one reason that we come together, and that is, say it, to build heaven on earth. That's the only reason. And we start it right here. We model it right here. Oscar Wilde said, one of my favorites, "We're all lying in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars." It's interesting to think back on the early Christian church because at the time, in the first century and the second century too, the lifespan of a human was about 25 years. Isn't that amazing? Very few people made it to 40. About a third of children died in childbirth. And yet, even then, people were willing to do just about anything just to prolong their lives by a day or two, just to make their little lives more comfortable. Except for Christians, the Fools for Christ said, this life isn't all there is. They talked about last week. This life is not all there is. And there's something far beyond these few paltry years we get to share with each other, something far more important that we do and that we learn to do here is to set up that other world. We model it in church, we take it out in justice to the world, and we also believe in it, in that life everlasting that will keep going on and on. And that's what we're doing here. We're really modeling all of that, and that's so much more important than our creaturely comforts. It is said that on the road to Rome, there were thousands of crucified Christians, some 4,000. Imagine the terror and horror of that, just to get into the main city on the main road, to walk past all that suffering and their families all the way in. What incredible faith it must have taken to be willing to do that. The incredible faith that there is far more than this life that we're living for. Something far more important than just us. Something bigger than our pleasure. Something bigger than our comfort. Something bigger than our life. And they knew it to be so. They believed in it more than they believed in themselves, that Christ had risen. They reached out. They touched him through his wounds everywhere. And they believed. And it wasn't a reasonable thing to do. It was an absolutely unreasonable thing to do. Lena Wertmuller is a filmmaker not well known today, but she was the editor for Fellini. And she seems to have dropped off the radar, but I love her films. And one of her films was called Seven Beauties. And in Seven Beauties, it's a comedy, a black comedy. Giancarlo Giannini, who is the main actor, plays this pimp in Naples who, just before the war, as Mussolini is rising to power, actually sells his own 7 sisters, the 7 beauties, to get by. He does everything wrong. He is absolutely committed to simply hedonism and his own pleasure and his family's well-being, and that means one thing: money. Well, it doesn't save him. He gets scooped up. He gets taken to a concentration camp, but that doesn't stop him. Throughout the concentration camp, he's wheeling and dealing, cheating, and trying to get ahead, doing anything and everything, selling everybody out just to survive. And he survives. And he survives. And at the end of the film, There is just his face, and it is the face of the survivor who will do anything to survive through all reason, and it is a vapid, frightened, empty visage. It's a compelling image. It's the farthest thing from being Christian. The Christian is the one, like Jesus, who displays the ultimate courage. The Christian is the one, like Thomas, who, through using his reason and his faith, meets the risen one. The Christian is the one who knows there's something far greater than us and far greater in this world and models it every Sunday and other days too, when they come to church and when they do the work of the divine by building up a community that withstands empire. That's what we're doing, and building heaven on earth. A little later in the service, we are going to covenant our new committee members and boards. We're going to recognize some saints in our communion. And we're going to do it because this is the beginning of paradise, nothing less. That's quite amazing when you think about it. But that's what we're promised, nothing less. So let's keep building. Let's be Christian. Let's remember who we are. Let's love each other. And let's live in paradise now. Don't be reasonable. It's way too boring. Amen.